Hello everyone and welcome back to Age Nagash, which is a channel dedicated to Age Sigmar. Now, this is going to be my first video for the Flesh Eater Court in the Age of Sigmar Army Archive. And I know I've already done quite a few videos for them, but I mean their first sort of, in-depth look at them in their new battle tome, basically, what they're like in 2nd edition. And this is going to be their lore video. Now, I could happily, like I've said before in the last video, go through basically every single word in this battle tome and read it out to you guys and tell you my thoughts on them. However, what I've decided to do is not do that and sort of focus on the courts. If you guys would like me to review every single bit of lore there is in this battle tome, please let me know down below. And I know you guys said you wanted lots of detail. However, I don't want to spend about 4 videos on their lore in case maybe that's a bit too much for you guys. But if you guys would like that, let me know and I can go back to it. But I thought maybe you guys would like me to focus a bit more on the gameplay side and obviously go in depth with the lore, but not to a certain extent. But like I say, let me know that in the comments down below, and if you would like me to talk about every single bit of lore, just let me know and I'll get to it. But what I've decided to do is focus on the grand courts of the Flesh Eater Courts. But if you're new to the Flesh Eater Courts, it's very important for you to know who they are, because there's a lot of anti-propaganda out there for them. And rest assured, all these lies about these cannibalism creatures that they are complete and utter nonsense. I can't, it's heresy to a certain extent. Basically, what the Flesh Eater Courts are, which is their nickname they've been given, I don't know who gave it. They're certainly far beyond that name. But essentially what they are is the last remaining bastions of order in the mortal realms that fight off the invasions of chaos on a daily basis. And they are, in all, the last strains of sanity within the mortal realms, fighting against endless heretics and endless monsters. Okay, so that is what they are. They have several different kingdoms. They have several different kings. They all bow down to the Carrion King, who is their great leader. He is the one who started this great sort of alliance against all the forces of chaos and destruction, to really sort of try and hold on to whatever remained of order. And they all bow down to him. He is their, their grand king, if you like, for all these different dukedoms with these abhorrent kings, all serving the Carrion King. They do their best they can. They're not... I know there's a lot of comparison against Flesh Eater Courts and Bretonnia. However, the sort of difference you've got there is Bretonnia notoriously was a bit more savage, a bit more sort of frenzy and less chivalry than the Flesh Eater Courts, I would probably say. And also the other thing for the Bretonnians is that they really counted their peasants as a second-class citizen, and very much so to the point where it wasn't even second-class. To some extent they were worth less than the fucking cattle. And that still can be a case within quite a few kingdoms there are in civilizations. However, with the Flesh Eater Courts, what they really do is really specialise on making sure every single citizen within their kingdom is fully protected under their royal banners. And they do this by, of course, there's going to be cases where the knights, they do outrank the the serfs, they outrank the general foot infantry, or the just the general soldiers, civilians. Of course they do, but they make sure that if a village is being attacked and it's some miles away from the grand castle, they will send out knights to the aid of the peasants there and not just let them die. So the Flesh Eater Courts, what I'm really trying to get across is there's a lot of comparison with the Flesh Eater Courts and the Bretonnians, but honestly guys, the Flesh Eater Courts are really they've got a bit more honour than the Bretonnians, and not as savage is what I would really like to say about them. And okay, so that is that's really sort of the lore summed up. I mean if I have to talk about the propaganda that's been spat out for the Flesh Eater Courts, which I honestly wouldn't believe a word of this, guys. It's absolutely nonsense. Unfortunately, it's all over the battle tome, which I don't understand. I mean, like, obviously all this information before the battle tomes print, they're all done on a computer, and obviously it's been hacked into, and a lot of the laws changed, and I can only apologise for you guys on that behalf, but I have to sort of talk about it as it's so big propaganda that it's come like what people naturally think of the Flesh Eater Courts. So I'll tell you about it just so you can understand just how ridiculous this proposal, what the Flesh Eater Courts are, that you will never believe it. Okay, so how the propaganda goes is obviously we cast back to the earlier stage of the mortal realms. Of course, we've got the Age of Myth, but that's really abstract, and no one really knows what goes on there. And then we jumpstart to the Age of Chaos. So, in the Age of Chaos, obviously Chaos swept over the mortal realms, destroyed pretty much every single civilization there was, apart from Azir and, of course, the Flesh-Eater Courts, who have stayed strong and defiant against these non-stop waves of the apocalypse. However, as the propaganda goes to believe, is that these great kingdoms of the Flesh-Eater Courts were actually known to be different empires, and they actually collapsed into despair and poverty until one day they would be visited upon by a abhorrent Ghoul King, which would be one of the descendants of the Carrion King, and essentially going to the Carrion King. So going back a bit, of course, Carrion King is basically a vampire who was trapped and locked away by Nagash, and being trapped and locked away for so long, he lost his sanity and basically went crazy and just developed this mass delusion. And then one day he managed to break out of his cruel imprisonment, and when he left, it wasn't just his delusion that he kept with inside him as a curse. It was actually what he spread, and it was infectious, and he would spread this upon other vampires. And then we go to when these kingdoms were in mass despair, and they would be in poverty and, like I say, famine, and they would be visited upon by one of these kings, being the abhorrent Ghoul Kings, and he would look upon these citizens of a once great empire and feel not, hatred or anger or any of those emotions. He would actually feel pity for these citizens of this great grand empire, and he would look upon to make sure that to try and not just, obviously these grand ideas of rebuilding the empire they once were, but just like feeding the guys, just trying to keep them alive, really doing basically charity work, and saw that these citizens really need a leader. So he would feed them, he would, recuperate their strength, he would, take command of them. He would essentially lead them to try and rebuild the greatness they once had. And, of course, the propaganda goes as this went on, his infection he caught from the, infection of the disillusion he caught from the Carrion King, he passed on to the citizens of this destroyed empire, and they actually turned into cannibals themselves. And ravenous cannibals of that, and they just wouldn't stop having this everlasting hunger for flesh. And again, this is how the disillusion goes. It makes these members of the Flesh-Eater Courts think that they are noble warriors, be it the Crypt Ghouls, who think they are nothing more than mere peasants or men-at-arms happy to serve in their glorious king's armies, or the Cryptorers or Crypt Flayers that know that they are the true knights of the realms. And beyond that, we have the courtiers, the grand courtiers of the courts for their king, who are the advisors of the king, who rally their men-at-arms. They are the generals of armies, and they are nothing more than ravenous beasts. So that is how the propaganda goes. Obviously, guys, don't really pay much attention to it. It's all utter lies spread from Sigmar. And this is the other thing comes into it. Also says that when Sigmar's grand hosts of the Stormcast came down to cleanse the realms of chaos and save it from the apocalypse. And it says that the Flesh-Eater Court see them nothing more than Sigmar's own corrupted army, with one single purpose: to impose Sigmar's tyranny and all who live in the mortal realms. So, like I say, that's what is sort of like put on as the propaganda. However, to be fair to the Flesh-Eater Courts, Sigmar is bloody well trying to do that. He's like, oh, I'm fighting for order and all that sort of thing, and my Stormcast can save one. Yeah, only if it's his fucking order. He doesn't give a shit about anyone else. He's a massive hypocrite. He says Nagash literally is a bastard. He says Nagash just makes people serve until eternity. The dead cannot rest whilst Nagash is there. He's a massive power-hungry freak. However, Sigmar, on the other hand, he's not letting people rest. He knows every time a Stormcast gets reforged, they lose a bit of themselves. They lose a bit more of their sanity. They become less human. They know he sends them in repeatedly to die, and it's incredible, crucial ways. Like, there's times where, like, if someone gets decapitated, that's how a Stormcast dies, or how I've modelled a Stormcast with his head being exploded by a Terrorgeist, which I think is only rightly to model it that way. then that means that Stormcast model, when it's being reforged, can always have a crucial pain in his head, feeling like his skull is exploding from the inside out. But he is made to fight every day for not even the rest of his days, but for eternity. And Sigmar has the sheer audacity to say to Nagash that Nagash is in the wrong. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry if you collect Stormcast armies who like Sigmar, but Sigmar is just a massive fucking prick. So anyway, that relates to the fact that, you know, Sigmar is imposing his tyranny onto the mortal realms. The fleshly courts are right. Don't listen to propaganda. Fleshly courts are not Bretonia in Age of Sigmar. They are the more royal, more regal, and most importantly have more chivalry than Bretonia ever did. So if you want to give me a dislike for that, crack on ahead. Anyway, so that is basically pretty much the standard foundations for the fleshly cults. Like I said, if you want me to go into more detail about their lore, I can do loads more videos on that, but you guys have got to let me know down below, because I don't want to basically waste my time and your time essentially. Right, okay, so now what I want to specialise this video for is the Grand Court of the Flesh Eater Courts, which are the new thing in the new Battle Tome, because we all knew about Disillusions before and stuff, but we want to see the new lore, don't we? So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the Morgant Grand Court. So now I'm going to be reading quite a bit from the Battle Tome, and what it says is the Morgant Grand Court. So from prime inner lands of Shaiish come the heathen masses of the Morgant Grand Court. Countless pallid bodies stained with their latest slaughter surge across the desolate landscape to sunder all in their path. Theirs are amongst the oldest courts in the realms, and in them Carrion King's madness remains at its purest. Cool. So and then going into the further... Okay, so firstly, this is like the most traditional one, it sounds like, you know, so maybe they have certain traditions and stuff like that will follow in the lore and rules, would be cool. Okay, and then it says, the courts that make up the Morgant Grand Court are the descendants of the living kingdoms in the realm of death. Their culture had been one of chivalry and honour. Let's just get it straight. It's still going to be chivalry and honour. Better not have propaganda in this either. Anyway, so where are we? And then it says, in which the gallant and strong fought to protect the weak and the unfortunate. When the people in these kingdoms were beset by the invaders or plagued by prowling monstrosities, the kings would gather knights and soldiers to their banners and march out to purge their lands of wickedness. It was said that to become a member of a king's court in those days, an inspiring knight had to prove his bravery and selflessness through service to the king's subject. A knight might have laid low a shambling cadaver titan that was feeding on the people of a particular village, or hunted down the Draco vulture that had been gorging itself on livestock in a given region, and plunged his blade through the winged beast's black heart. Similarly, to serve in a sovereign's army, a soldier had to uphold the core tenets of chivalry and had to willingly lay down his life for the least of the king's subjects. These kingdoms prospered in the age of myth, their influence extending from Amethyst princedoms in the north to the glittering marsh in the south. They were hailed by their allies as exemplars of civilization and respected by the few enemies they had as worthy and honourable foes. They also lived in peace with the dead within their borders, treating the spirits of the departed with the same dignity as they did the living, and it was this existence with their ancestors that caused these kings to side with Nagash when Shaiish was beset by the invaders. The armies of Sigmar and Chaos tore through the realms of death, sundering the magnificence of the chivalric civilizations. Probably got that word wrong. Anyway, scattering their people and driving them to the brink of elimination. Yet from the crumbling ruins the Morgant Grand Court arose, gifted with the madness of the Carrion King. The Mordants saw their corpse-strewed homeland as lush and verdant once more, and their slavering abhorrence as principles of nobility. They set about reclaiming their territories from the invaders, driven by the belief that they could return their land to a state of peace. But in truth, the rise of these courts only served to further soak the northern reaches of the prime inner lands with gore. Wherever abhorrence and courtiers travelled, ghouls flocked to their side in droves, the bounds of loyalty between highborn and commoners having persisted across generations of cannibalistic savagery, and together they set about slaughtering all who trespassed within their domain. Since the age of chaos, a Morgant abhorrence have spread throughout the realms, drawing Mordants to their side in overwhelming numbers. Wherever they establish new courts, they see other living beings as invading armies or rampaging monstrosities, and so march out en masse to cleanse their lands. They look to Nagash as their patron god, and see all who oppose him as wicked and ignoble. Above all else, they have fierce loathing of Sigmar. The Morgant courts believe that, were it not for the God King's betrayal, Nagash would have been able to repel the forces of chaos from Shyish once and for all. Okay, and then it goes on to their little image. I'm going to try and find these images on the internet for, like, you know, basically their emblem for each court and put it on the video. If I can't, apologies, but if I can, hopefully I can. Anyway, it says, amidst the bones and skins, a dripping versal ancient symbols of the Morgant Grand Court can be seen daubed in blood. And if I can't find this picture, basically what it is a ghoul torso with intestines hanging out of its mouth and a crown made out of the same intestines, being small intestines, and a crown also made out of broken spines and splinters of a bone, which is very nice to see. It looks very much like, I say it's a torso, I think it's a shield. So anyway, guys, also thing to say is, also through reading this stuff, I haven't read through this stuff before, I haven't read through the Battle Tome fully yet, so I'm reading this for the first time, you guys, so it's quite cool news for me, because also this looks like it's my Grand Court. It's the one that hates the Stormcast the most. And to be fair, with the Stormcast, I know I've already had a little bit of well, I was going to say a little bit of a rant about Sigmar already in this video, but I think I very much about a truth a giving than a rant. And what I would say is, to be fair to these guys, I mean, yeah, they sided with Nagash because, you know, Chaos was invading. It's like, God, you know, Sigmar let Chaos in. I mean, you know, technically it was Nagash, but between us, Sigmar let, you know, Chaos in. And, you know, Nagash is like, right, I'm going to defend my realm. He's defending himself, but I'm going to defend my realm. And all the, you know, the kingdom's going to join me. You know, the Morgant kingdom was going to join Nagash in defending the realm. And then Sigmar's like, I'm going to send my armies through it as well. And then make my Sigmar armies kill civilians and destroy these, you know, kingdoms and all that sort of thing. And returned this glorious empire into the Flesh Eater courts that they are today, which is obviously glorious, but still none the same. That shows that Sigmar is up for a genocide and potentially ethnic cleansing, because he targeted these guys because they supported Nagash. They treated Nagash as their patron, they treated Nagash as their god. So Sigmar targeted these guys because of their religious beliefs and killed every single one of them, including the children. And the ones that did survive turned into cannabis monsters, and that is all on Sigmar's conscience. But does he care about that? No, because Sigmar is I'm not going to go into it again, I've already talked about that. But anyway, sorry, talking about the Flesh Eater courts, forgive me about my ramblings on about Sigmar, but I really can't stand the bastard and I hate him. Anyway, so what I like about these guys, this actually gives a lot of like detail and stuff, a nice little flavoursome to them. So obviously these guys, you know, they hate Sigmar, but like I talked about chivalry and stuff in the Flesh Eater courts in general, were like, you know, sort of like they look out for each other, you know, the knight will look out for the peasant sort of thing. And this, like, honestly, guys, first time reading this thing, and it's actually just basically sort of agreed with everything I said before, which is really cool to see. And it's nice to have like a specific place in the realm of death, you know, laid out, you know, like it's just north of the glittering marshes and all those sorts of things. Gives it a lot more character, and it really sort of has Age of Sigmar. It's really abstract lore. It gives you a place that's sort of like tied down to go like, yeah, my guys come from the Morgant court, and then I could imagine them on the map, and that's where they are, and they're there, and there's all this going. So yeah, they're quite nice to see. Right, okay, I can't really compare it to the other courts yet because I haven't really read them, but you know, for the first one, that's what cool. Because I imagine these guys, I haven't seen the rules and all that sort of thing, you know, and comparing them, so don't get me here. But by reading it, it sounds like they're one of the more sort of, you know, popular courts. You know, if anything, these are the guys who, you know, who have the box art. You know, like the Ultramarines for the Space Marines and the Hammers of Sigmar for the Stormcast. You know, they're like the poster boy, you know, court, if you like, or grand court for the Flesh Eater Courts. Might be completely wrong about that, because I haven't really read too much into it, but it sounds like how they are by reading it. They sound like the most vanilla Flesh Eater Courts, if you know what I mean. Okay, and then we're going to go on to the Hallow Mourn. So the Hallow Mourn Grand Court. So packs of hulking cannibals stampede towards their foe, the sound of insane snarling as the armies of the Hallow Mourn Grand Court close in. Cryptoists charging at a force to launch themselves into the opposing lines, obliterating shield walls and butchering the enemy's ordered ranks. So more so than any other Flesh Eater courts in history, the Hallow Mourn Grand Court is shrouded in mystery. In a long dead age, the empire that spawned the Hallow Mourn courts extended across the mortal realms. Its glorious emperor, whose name has been lost to the ravages of time, brought knowledge and civilization for those whom he encountered, fostering harmony between desperate lands and prosperity for all. In his travels throughout the realms, he discovered many wondrous relics, some of which used to help lift up his people, and others that he deemed too dangerous for mortal use. In order to protect those in his empire, the emperor secreted the arcane implements and eldritch devices he had found within the enchanted vaults, and in this way kept them hidden until a time in which they would be needed. Among a few who had knowledge of these vaults was an order of royal family from Shamon, known as the Knights of the Hallow Mourn, who knew not what was in the vaults, only that they must be protected at all costs. When the servants of the dark gods began to sweep across the mortal realms, the Knights of the Hallow Mourn were sent to secure the vault against the taint of chaos. Every kingdom dedicated to the order rode swift into hostile territory, the knights clad in the finest armour of Shamon. As they advanced, they swore oaths that their duty would not go unfulfilled, but their enemies were too powerful, and their defiant crusade was shattered. The tattered remains of the order kept moving, trying to outpace the enemy. When rations ran out, the peasants were eaten. Next, for the knights could not give up their horses if they hoped to ever fulfill their duty, but eventually even the steeds were consumed, and it was this most unthinkable act that opened the minds of the Hallow Mourn to madness. The Hallow Mourn Grand Court is all that remains of the once proud crusade. While they still believe themselves to be noble order of royal knights, heavily armoured horsemen, towering above their enemies on the battlefield, in truth their bodies have grown to monstrous proportions after generations of gorging upon flesh. In battle, the largest of the number barrel ahead of the throng, charging out like lances to shatter the enemy defences, leaving those mordant packs that follow to feast upon the broken bodies of the dead and dying. Long gone are the polished suits of mail that once defined this order. Its last vestige, the oxidized correlation of the mordant's sickly flesh. The Hallow Mourn courts continue to search for the buried relics they were once sent to defend. Their abhorrence regularly launching new crusades into enemy lands. After eliminating the foe on the battlefield, the Flesh Eater courts slaughter their way through towns and strongholds alike with terrifying speed, digging up tombs and graveyards in the blind hope that they will find what they are seeking. Usually such fanatic searchers yield only rotting corpses. Through in their disillusion, the flesh eaters see these as sacred artifacts, dispositioned by their dimly remembered emperor. The largest of the Hallow Mourn greedily devour these corpses, secure in the belief that they are keeping precious relics they have discovered from the clutches of the enemy. Okay, and then going on to their coat of arms, you've got basically like 2 crypt horrors crossing bones with flare wings behind them. And then it says, this coat of arms is a grim mockery of the crossed blades of the knights of the Hallow Mourn, which has symbolised their oath to their emperor. Okay guys, so like I said, I like the last one, you know, talking about how they're all anti-Sigmar and stuff, that's all cool. However, these guys sound definitely up my alley because of the huge, you know, focus on knights, which of course are our crypt flares and our crypt horrors. A load of nonsense here about how they all, you know, turn to cannibalism and all that sort of thing. However, they do sound pretty cool, and obviously, you know, if we pay attention to the propaganda, it's a pretty cool and tragic story. You know, they were sent on a great crusade to protect these artifacts, and firstly their emperor was, you know, like so much of what would be classed as a good ruler that he didn't even want these, you know, like great powerful artifacts to be used. He would keep them locked away and only needed in the most dire of needs. And so that's how much of a thoughtful emperor he was for the rest of his kingdom and, you know, citizens of his kingdom. He really cared for them, and obviously his knights and everyone of the kingdom really did love their emperor, and that's why they went on this crusade. And unfortunately they got lost, they turned to cannibalism, and that's how they ended up. And yes, that's really cool. So big focus on knights. I imagine in the rules, you guys probably will know this, but probably in the rules this court focuses on, I think it is the one that like focuses on like charging and extra movement and damaging the enemy when you charge. I think that's the sort of thing. But I'm not going to properly review the rules until I get to that video, so I'm not going to go into that now. However, this looks like it's going to fit my army, as I've got like, I think I've got at least 24 flayers, 27 flayers, and I've got 12 crypt horrors at least. So yeah, I'm definitely going to be trying this court out, regardless of what the rules are like. So yeah, that is pretty cool for them. And then going on to the next one, we have the Blister Skin Grand Court. And I know I've seen a lot of people post on Facebook about this one, so I presume it's quite a popular one. And then going into the lore for it, darkness envelops the battlefield as the mordants of the Blitterskin Grand Court fill the sky, the flapping of leathery wings, screeching of hundreds of hungry mouths defend those below, drowning out all thoughts of hope and heralding the gruesome slaughter that is to come. The flesh eaters of the Blitterskin Grand Court are instantly recognisable by the hideous burns that cover their bodies. Long and wretched lives spent terrorising the sun-blasted plains of Ashi have left these creatures with gaping patches of peeled skin beneath which layers of charred muscular and a bleached bone lie exposed, as they scrabble across the deserts and the barren lands in search of fresh victims. The reek of seared meat precedes their advance, but even if their prey catches a wind of their acid scent, there is a little chance of escape, for the armies of the Blitterskin Grand Court move at a terrifying speed, following the lead of winged mordants and courtiers as they encircle their enemies. The empire from which the Blisterskin's court arose was founded upon various forms of sun worship. Their priesthood was made up of members of multiple royal families, with kings and queens of neighbouring city-states leading their people in sacred rites. During the harvest season, a third of every crop was given up as a sacrifice. Sheaves were placed atop the tallest ziggurats and are left to be claimed by the sun, and thereby ensuring that the next harvest would be abundant. At high noon, royals and commoners alike retreated indoors while the sun was at its most intense, an act of humble acknowledgement of its wrathful glory. Though these kingdoms were dotted across Ashi, they knew the light of the sun emanated from Haish, and they saw this distant realm as a sacred place from which all illumination and wisdom pour into existence. They actively sought out other civilizations whom they could spread their culture. They tried to spread this with such nations as Abatsa, Aspira, and the Agolaxi in the west of Ardian. With states they shared their most sacred beliefs, imposing all to honour the sun, so the darkness might never fall across the lands. When the armies of chaos swept across Ashi, the sun worshippers were driven from their homes, their cities and crops set ablaze. With no harvest to sacrifice, they gave over the weak and old as burnt offerings, and prayed desperately for the sun to score the legions of the dark gods from the realm. Their descent into wretchedness was swift and irresistible. Yet hope of the scattered survivors was rekindled by the arrival of a mighty abhorrence. Inflicted by madness, the sun worshippers believed they had finally gained the enlightenment they had always sought. No longer did they humble themselves by hiding from the sun, instead choosing to bask in its full furious glory, their flesh cooking in the blazing heat. The most pious amongst them were blessed with wings with which to rise ever closer to the sun, while the rest looked upon them with awe, following their swift flight with a zealous admirement. The Blisterskin Grand Court continues to send its members to its neighbours' lands, but where once they spread tenets of devotion, they now sow only horror across Ashi and beyond. The royalty still guide their subjects in acts of worship, ensuring that offerings are given up after each harvest. As such, when the armies of the Blisterskin Court descend upon the enemies, a third of those they slaughter are left to fry in the sun, leaving great swathes of blackened and bloated corpses that tell of the flesh eaters are present. Okay, and then going on to their coat of arms, it says the amortifice of the Blisterskin Grand Court depicts the common folk and the royal of all looking upwards towards the glorious light of the sun. So this is really quite interesting as well, because as I saw a lot of people post on Facebook saying they're taking the Blisterskin, like I say, I will go into all their rules in a different video, so don't worry about that. However, when I saw this post, I didn't really see anything about the lore behind it. I imagined the Realm of Fire, just because, you know, Blisterskin burning sounds like that. However, this is really quite interesting, because I know the Flesh Eater Courts, they didn't like all really sort of worship Nagash. Some of them did, but they were sort of, you looked at the Flesh Eater Courts before this battle tome, and they were mainly the sort of, you know, Nagash's sort of, how do we describe it, you know, demented child. I know that's not exactly how they came to be, but it was almost how they're looked upon. They're not like his endless legions that, you know, their only will is Nagash's will. The Flesh Eaters were a bit like rebels. However, this is quite nice with this, because obviously we've read one where, let me just refresh my name, we've got the Morgant Grand Court, which very much does follow Nagash, and then we've got the Blisterskins that don't even follow Nagash, they don't even follow, you know, Sigmar, or, you know, well, how can you blame them for not following Sigmar? But what they don't do is they don't follow a god that we're already sort of aware of. They follow the sun god, which might be written in a little bit of text somewhere. However, this is really, really quite cool, because these are still in their dissolution. So in, you know, when they had their glorious empire, they still worship in the sun, and then now that they're delusional, they still worship the sun god. You know, they still carry that belief forward, which is really quite cool, and quite a nice different aspect to take with the Flesh Eater Court. So that's really quite nice to see there. Okay, and then going on to the next one, we have got the Gristlegore Grand Court. So what it says is, where once they lived in harmony with the lands around them, the Gristlegore courts now rampage across Gur, butchering all they see. They believe themselves to be ruled by tranquil and peace-loving kings, but the grim truth is that the abhorrence of these courts are beings of pure frenzy. The crack of boulders being pushed aside and trees being uprooted precedes the advance of the Grittlescore Grand Court. Those they are hunting huddle together in defense positions, listening as the insane snarling of the flesh eaters draw ever closer. Monstrous howls rise above the din as abhorrent courtiers and great winged beasts burst through the dense foliage and with savage haste tear their startled enemies to bloody ribbons. The armies of the Gristlegore Grand Court are led by champions of peerless ferocity. Fighting with gruesome bloodlust, these warriors hack down multiple foes with every passing heartbeat and launch waves of amethyst magic that pulsify huge whole ranks of enemies. Only the undead creatures of the Ghoul King's menagents have ever hoped of keeping pace with the rampant butchery. The ferocity of the Gristlegore courts is a stark contrast to the culture of the tranquil kingdoms from which they arose. Before succumbing to the abhorrence curse, the people of the Gurish civilization found ways to live in balance with their savage surroundings. Slavering beasts, carnivorous plants, and predatory mountains were all viewed with great respect and were treated as sovereign beings. The highest vicious and introspection and contemplation, whereas hunting and killing were seen as necessary evils to avoid when possible. Though the realm in which they lived abundant with predators, the people of the tranquil kingdoms sought peace where they could find it, spending long weeks fasting and meditating. When forced to war, the nobility rode at the fore to engage the enemy first, for by risking their own lives they hoped to spare their subjects from the horrors of open battle. These nobles honed the art of swordplay and spellcraft to perfection, and were able to best many opponents at once, but their skill could not save them from the coming of chaos. As the armies of the dark gods stormed through Gur, the tranquil kingdoms descended into anarchy. Peaceful minds were filled with panic, and common folk called upon their lords to face the coming hordes. But though they fought valiantly, and nobility could not save their people, and were forced to watch as their subjects were put to the blade and their cities razed to the ground, with no one left to fight for these, the degraded royals wandered aimlessly until they were found by powerful abhorrence and once more given purpose. Now transformed by their insanity, the royals of the Gristlegore Grand Court prowl the realms like packs of alpha predators. In their minds they still seek balance and harmony, even if they shred their prey to gruesome chunks. Their desire to be at one with their surroundings causes them to pierce their own flesh and shards of Gurish realmstone, and they believe they are purifying themselves through fasting, even when dripping hunks of meat are lodged into their maws. To the Gristlegore abhorrent, every strike of arcane manifestation is measured, delivered with perfection, and only after all other paths to victory have been contemplated. Yet to see such a beast in action is to behold a mindless, thrashing monstrosity. Okay, and then going to its coat of arms, we have only the savage and royalty of the Gristlegore Grand Court are depicted in the heraldry, for to them fall the responsibility of protecting their people. Okay, so basically what you've got is a sort of stretched out, face of a abhorrent king, which is quite cool. And yeah, these guys are pretty cool as well. They're, it's all quite similar, aren't they, the courts? Like some of them are a little bit more different. With the Gristlegore, it's quite nice, how they see themselves as, like being one with their surroundings. It didn't say this, but it feels like to me a little bit like, wood elves in, like a forest, how they, they are one with their, environment. That's what these guys see to be. However, they are basically corrupting, destroying the environment, and they are, obviously all this is propaganda, but it says that they are, very, very cannibalistic, and you know, they've tried to still, you know, be one with nature, if you like. However, they are shall we say, in the propaganda, they are abominations. So yeah, again, it's the cruel, twisted humour of the disillusion. Okay, then going on to our next. Oh, there's only 4. Okay, apologies about that. I thought there was more than 4. I'm just looking through the book now. No, only 4. Oh, okay. Apologies about that, guys. I thought there was 6. Don't know why. I just thought maybe they're up to the same sort of level as, you know, like, what do you call it, like a storm host. But you know, sorry for being so stupid, guys. I really, really do apologise for that. I mean, I really let myself go by thinking these guys would be put on the same pedestal as, you know, like a Stormcast. I mean, not like model-wise, but, you know, having the same amount of, you know, like courts in comparison to Storm hosts. That would be really cool. But obviously not is the case for that one. Very sadly, not going to swear anymore. So that is how I want to do the lore video for Flesh Eater Courts. Like I said before, I can go into crazy detail, and to be fair, I know I asked in the last video how much detail you want me to go in, and someone put the term balls deep, which I respect you for that, because you're honest and that's what you want. However, if I put my balls deep into, you know, the more of the Flesh Eater Courts, number 1, I don't really want to teabag that shit. Number 2, I quite like my balls, and I know Flesh Eater Courts do quite like to, shall we say, not really too funny on what they eat, and they do like cannibalism, so I don't want to be too precise. However, you know, all that I'm, you know, distracting myself. Anyway, I can go into super detail on every single bit of the Flesh Eater Courts, but I want you guys to know and let me know, because like I could honestly, guys, I could spend about like 5 videos or something talking about their lore. So I'd rather get permission from you than do that, you know, straight away. Something else I've been considering as well is how I normally, if you've been watching the archive videos, you know that the first video is their lore, second video is their allegiance ability, the third video is talking about their units, and then the fourth one is talking about the heroes, and the fifth one's talking about the battalions. That's basically how it works. But I'm up for doing it different for the Flesh Eater Courts if you want. I can happily talk about 1 unit per video. Yes, so give every single unit, even the lesser units or heroes, their own video. I will go through the lore for that unit or that hero, of course, and then talk about its war scroll. I will happily do that if that's something you guys would like, opposed to the standard all the units in one video, all the heroes in another video. Again, let me know your thoughts behind that down below, because if you guys are interested in me doing that, it's going to take a longer time. The videos will be shorter, but they will be, I don't say more precise, but they will be more targeted to that unit, and really sort of spend more dedication on it. Like, the videos will be shorter, but if you added them all together, it might, you know, be a longer amount of recordings collectively, if you like, for the army. But I'm happy to do it how I normally do it, however you guys prefer. Anyway, this lore video went on for about 40 minutes anyway, talking about the Grand Courts, and giving you a basic understanding of, I don't really want to say the lore for the Flesh Eater Courts, but the propaganda that's out there, and something we should all be aware of, as obviously the nobility of our Grand Courts can really not be undermined, and it is that sort of thing what Sigmar is trying to use against us. So we really have to be on our guard about this and not let it damage our reputation as the noble knights we are. Right, okay guys, so like I say, that's the lore video I'm going to do for the Flesh Eater Courts for the moment. If you guys would like more, or you want me to, like I say, do 1 video per unit, or you'd like me to do it how I'm normally doing it, and you're happy with that, please let me know, because basically, obviously, there's an amazing amount of YouTubers out there, and, you know, fantastic Warhammer ones, of course. However, I want to be the one who, like, basically dedicates the most to the Flesh Eater Courts, because they are my thing. So I'm more than happy to spend an incredible amount of time on them. So like I say, guys, let me know how you want me to take the Flesh Eater Courts forward. Right, so if you have enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe and comment down below, as that does hugely help me. It really, really does help the channel grow, and the bigger the channel grows, basically, the better it's going to be. So if you could do that, that's absolutely fantastic. And as always, guys, I thank you very much for watching this video. And until next time, remember, Nagash is all, and all is one in Nagash.